All right, guys, welcome in. Today I wanted to discuss the recent articles that I saw about the odds being released on NBA expansion. Who are the current favorites? There's 7 cities that I saw that have odds. The first thing I wanted to look at, though, is this troubling development here. The NBA possibly talking about Saudi Arabia buying minority stakes in franchises. This is a complete downward spiral. The NBA already has significant issues with China to where they really cannot comment or condemn any issues in China because they get so much money from the population there. They're really in between a rock and a hard place. And Saudi Arabia, the money that they have, if we do not safeguard ourselves, they're going to have all the influence. I mean, they offered Messi a 3-year, $1.6 billion deal. The money that they have is scary crazy. So I think anytime, like, this could be the start of a really downward trend when you've got, other countries buying stakes in NBA franchises. It compromises your league and doesn't allow you to take moral stands like the NBA with the whole China issue and Daryl Morey. It's a big problem. So that is a troubling report, but let's take a look. We've got some headlines. The NBA talks expansion. Maybe Louisville will step up. I do like Louisville. I would put Louisville at 3rd best odds right now to get an expansion team. And then there's also talk NBA possibly considering expansion to Canada. Because Canada has several NHL teams, there is infrastructure in a lot of different cities, a lot of different provinces to be able to have another NBA team. I do not think that's going to happen, though. So here it is, 7 cities most likely for expansion. This article coming out. Number 1, they've got Vegas minus 1,000. So yes, Las Vegas, very likely getting an MLB team. They've already gotten an NHL team. They've already gotten an NFL team. And it is a very small city to have 4 professional, sports teams. But you do have to understand there is a lot of tourism. There's a lot of foot traffic coming in and out. So it would make sense for Las Vegas. A lot of NBA players have said that they want a team in Vegas as well. Them being minus 1,000, it seems like a little much, but they already have a beautiful state-of-the-art arena that would probably become immediately like a top 3 or top 5 arena in the NBA that right now hosts the Golden Knights. So yeah, Vegas, I would say, is a heavy favorite. Seattle sitting minus 500. A very similar situation. They formerly had the Supersonics. They've got a state-of-the-art arena that was recently completely redone in a $1 billion renovation that hosts the Seattle Kraken. Seattle very, very likely a heavy favorite along with Vegas to get an expansion team. And then the teams on the plus side, you've got Mexico City plus 400. I would put Mexico City plus like 10,000. It just doesn't seem possible. People already talk about the altitude problem in Denver, but Mexico City is even higher, 2,000 feet higher than Denver, Colorado in terms of feet above sea level. So that is a big problem for the NBA. I could see the NBA playing a 1-off or 2-off game, neutral site type thing like the NFL does in Mexico City. I think they already do it. Doesn't the NBA also play games in Paris or something? They did it a few times. But yeah, Mexico City is not that it's a waste of time to talk about, but it kind of is. It's just not possible based on its location. And then when you talk about what about other cities in Mexico that are maybe a little lower in terms of their altitude, I think they have crime problems. So I don't think that would happen. I really don't think the NBA or the NFL or the MLB is putting a team in Mexico at this point right now. You've got Vancouver plus 800, so that would be a team in Canada with pretty crazy plus odds. I'd be interested in Quebec City. I don't know how much of a fan base the NBA has in Quebec City, but they do have a really nice arena that right now is pretty much vacant because Quebec City doesn't even have an NHL team. But yeah, Vancouver, I just don't see it. It is plus 800. They do have the infrastructure though because they have an NHL team. You've got Kansas City plus 1,500. They have another similar situation kind of as Quebec City. They have an arena that is perfectly fine, ready to host an NBA team, ready to host an NHL team. My speculation with Kansas City, there's probably going to be a lot happening with that city. They're trying to get a new MLB stadium in the city and move on from Kauffman Stadium, and they're also trying to get a new NHL team, possibly a relocation of the Coyotes. They're like the third or fourth highest contender in terms of that. So Kansas City for the NBA, I really don't see it. They have Louisville listed at 2,500. So yeah, I think this is a good bet to take. I'm not even sure you can bet on this stuff. If you can, it's probably like a limit of $100, but like Louisville to me plus the 2,500 is good value. The big issue and what they said in the comments on why this was such low odds, it is a very small market, but there has to be a lot of demand for a professional sports team in Louisville. That's kind of my thinking. Kentucky not having a single professional sports team, also Virginia not having a single professional sports team. Maybe that leads to Virginia Beach getting some team. But Louisville, I like the KFC Yum Center. It could host a team tomorrow. The problem is when you compare it to places like Vegas and Seattle, it's always going to, not compare favorably to them because its market is smaller and its population is smaller. And then you've got Paris and Victor Wembanyama. Imagine they expand it to Paris and then they give Paris the number one pick so they could take Wembanyama. That would honestly be pretty cool. I mean, Paris would be crazy if they got Wembanyama, but, obviously that's not going to happen. The Spurs are going to get him. They are plus 10,000. So, yeah, it's not going to happen with any team in Europe. It would have to be a very similar situation to the NFL, possibly expanding to Europe. There was talk about Jacksonville, becoming London. And the reason that really can't happen is because the travel is just so ridiculous for one singular team to be in Europe. I think with the NBA, it'd probably actually be impossible because there's way more games and you'd be traveling back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You would have to have your own European league with at least 2, maybe 4 teams, or your own European division with 2 or 4 teams, and those teams would face each other a bunch of times, and you would have block scheduling, so the teams from Europe would travel to the United States, play 5 or 6, or possibly like 7 or 8 straight road games, then come home and play like 7 or 8 straight home games, go on the road again. It would just be, honestly, too much of a hassle, especially when you compare NBA's current in-house options, meaning in the United States, the options are much better because the travel is not a concern and you already have beautiful state-of-the-art NBA arenas with fan bases that very likely will support the teams. I do think there could be a little bit of a problem with Las Vegas and the TV ratings from that. It's just like there's no real big fan base in Vegas for ratings, I feel like. With the NFL, it can work. I guess with the NHL, it's working. But if you also bring in MLB and NBA, that is a lot of mouths to feed for one city. And I know they get a lot of, foreigners coming in and stuff like that, but I am a little skeptical on it. And then these is a division mock, the NBA divisions with 2 expansion teams. So the NBA divisions are pretty much worthless. Like nobody cares who wins the NBA Central Division or anything like that. That's what the MLB should do. The MLB right now has a major problem with the AL Central. It's a horrible division, but because the division winner is guaranteed a playoff spot, they're going to get a team in the playoffs. They really should change that. But you can see this has the Supersonics joining Portland, Sacramento, and Golden State. Vegas joins the Clippers, Lakers, and Suns. And then other teams get slightly rotated around. But that's just kind of a mock on the potential divisions. Again, the divisions really don't mean anything. I do think in the long run, what you should look at is Eastern Conference, Western Conference. Supersonics have to go to the Western Conference. Las Vegas, I would say, also has to go to the Western Conference, and then you would have a team like the New Orleans Pelicans moving to the Eastern Conference, and maybe also Minnesota moving to the Eastern Conference. It just makes sense in terms of geographically, those are the 2 closest teams. You could also have Memphis moving to the Eastern Conference as well, depending, and keeping Minnesota or New Orleans in the Western Conference, but that's just kind of how I see it right now. So when it comes to the NBA expansion, you do have Seattle and Las Vegas as the 2 heavy favorites. I do not think they would build new arenas for either of them. You know, Seattle is already pitching the idea of the Seattle Kraken and Supersonics sharing the same arena. It just makes sense. They already made $1 billion investment into it. And then you do have the new T-Mobile Arena. It's very confusing because you have the T-Mobile, I believe, Arena in Las Vegas that hosts the Golden Knights. And then you have the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City, which is pretty much vacant right now. I believe that hosts the Big 12 college basketball tournament. So it is like I don't know why T-Mobile has both the names. It's very confusing and annoying, but both of those arenas are relatively new. They are pretty impressive, and the NBA would really only have to build a new arena if they went to like Virginia or somewhere where, you know, they're not used to going. You could even go to Canada and they already have the arenas in place because all of those cities, even Quebec City, they've got NHL level arenas that can easily turn into NBA arenas. So you wouldn't have to build anything new. That's why I think that All Net Resort has like a 0% chance of working out. I mean, I understand the idea of it, but how many arenas or stadiums does Las Vegas really need at this point? I mean, you can only build so many of them, especially if the A's are putting up a stadium as well. I think they would much rather, in terms of keeping the footprint down just on the Strip, just, you know, play at the T-Mobile Arena because it is beautiful. So that's just my take on that. But I do think, you know, Seattle and Vegas, the two heavy favorites. And then the NBA really is just, they're getting too gritty for their own good with this Saudi Arabia stuff and things like that because they have the money. And once they buy stakes in NBA teams, they immediately have influence. Immediately. It's the same thing that happened with China. China weaponized their population. I'm not saying they made them all NBA fans on purpose, but if you're the Chinese government, it does benefit you to have a huge population be NBA fans. I don't know if you guys have actually looked into that. There are like, it's almost like the NBA is more popular in China than it is in America. It's just because their population is ridiculous. They have a much higher density of people in a small area, and you can weaponize that population and really make the NBA bend its knee because you can say, hey, we're not going to show NBA games in China anymore if you don't do X, and you immediately lose any moral ground, any high ground, and you really have to compromise your own beliefs to appease another country in the name of money. That's the big problem. So we'll have to see what happens with that, but they just have too much money. You're going to offer a player a 3-year, $1.6 billion contract, man. If they're throwing around offers like that, that is scary money. That is scary money that no one in North America in terms of professional sports has ever seen anything in the same stratosphere as a contract like that. So we'll have to see what happens. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.